This is the 35th film in the MCU and the 4th Captain America movie. Sam Wilson, the new Captain America, is at the center of an international crisis as he uncovers a nefarious global plot. Hey there guys, let's talk about Captain America Brave New World, originally titled Captain America New World Order. But if you're going to reshoot half of your movie and change everything, you might as well change the subtitle as well. Going into this film, my expectations were very, very low. I just wanted to see a mildly competent action film, and over the last 5 years from Marvel, there's only been a few movies that were worth the hype that I would go back and ever watch again. And back in 2019, after the events of Endgame, when Sam Wilson finally became Captain America, since that time, he got a Disney Plus series, but that was 4 years ago. And now, finally in 2025, he gets his first feature-length solo outing as Captain America. And the biggest question you have to ask yourself is, did this movie ever stand a chance? Now, love it or hate it, Sam Wilson is officially wielding that shield as Captain America. And I like me some Anthony Mackie, and I feel like he really is trying his best in this role to be a believable Captain America. But unfortunately, the writers of this film were not trying at all. Because the screenplay in this movie does none of the characters any favors. It's a complete disservice to everyone in the film, and I feel like if the plot was better and the dialogue was better, that would have elevated this movie at least a few notches. And speaking of the screenplay of this film, it does feel like it borrows a lot from Captain America Winter Soldier as far as plot points go. For example, there's a government conspiracy going on and Captain America goes on a road trip to uncover what's really lurking in the shadows, and then there's a big fight action sequence, roll credits, halfway through the credits, have a cutscene, and you get what I'm saying. Except, and I think it's very fair to make this comparison because they are very similar films in the MCU, when it comes to Captain America Winter Soldier, that is perfection when it comes to a Captain America story. When it comes to Captain America Brave New World, it tries to duplicate what its predecessor did 11 years ago, except it gets everything wrong and it feels like the Kmart version of its predecessor. Because one movie feels like a blockbuster and the other feels like a direct-to-streaming movie you would watch once on a rainy day and then instantly forget about it. Now let's get this out of the way. It's no conspiracy or theory. This movie was reshot and rewritten into oblivion, and you can feel it when you're watching it up on the big screen. Some of those reshoots just ooze through the screen. It's very clunky. It's almost jarring at times. There are subplots that lead to nowhere. And for example, one of the major subplots that they took out of this film was WWE wrestler Seth Rollins was actually supposed to play a villainous role in this movie, but that entire subplot was removed from the movie. And in place of that, we got Giancarlo Esposito, who appears as Sidewinder in the movie. And as far as his character Sidewinder goes, it's sort of reminiscent to the character Crossbones in the previous Captain America movies. He's sort of a bad guy who shows up to have a fight sequence, but ultimately you could just delete his entire subplot out of the movie and it wouldn't affect anything. Now, with all that said, one of the few interesting aspects of this film is it finally follows up on the Celestials, you know, those 300-mile-tall cosmic gods that are just floating around in the ocean. And while it's one of the main plot points in the film, it sort of feels like an afterthought. Oh yeah, and speaking of new characters, we get a new sidekick character who wants to be the new Falcon. By the way, who would ever want to be the new Falcon? That's like people signing up to be the new Robin. Would you like to wear green underwear and hang out with a guy dressed like a bat? I don't know. I probably would. And the best way to describe his character is, it's sort of like Maverick's goose. That's a Top Gun reference. And speaking of Top Gun, there's one action scene I need to talk about right now. There's a high-speed aerial dogfight sequence in this film with fighter jets and Sam Wilson flying around with his vibranium wings. And this entire sequence should have been something unique in comparison to Steve Rogers' Captain America. He couldn't fly around, but Sam Wilson can. And I was hoping that this scene would really separate the two and show us just how badass Sam Wilson's Captain America could be. And when you have fighter jets and you're up in the air and you're flying around, there's missiles and explosions, I was hoping that this scene could have been a sliver of what made Top Gun Maverick so thrilling. Maybe it was the quick cut editing or the cinematography or the direction or a combination of all of those things, but I really feel like this scene could have been a million times better than it was, and I feel like if they just had a competent director, this movie at times at least would have been an entertaining action movie, even if the story completely sucks ass. Harrison Ford in this film, who plays President Thunderbolt Ross, feels like a mildly incompetent political leader, to say the least. He almost feels like he has a slight form of bipolar disorder, and he doesn't know where he's at half the time, or at least that's how his character was portrayed. And he only has a few security advisors around him, and it's like, that's it. That's the entire government in this movie. And his biggest concern and main driving force in this film is some treaty with Japan that's a major plot point that ultimately doesn't really matter all that much. And speaking of Harrison Ford, and don't get me wrong, I love seeing me some Harrison Ford in this film, returning once again as the president. And the last time he did that, he was on Air Force One, pulling a Die Hard. That's a great movie. Check it out sometime. Way better than this one. But as far as Harrison Ford becoming the Red Hulk in this film, and no spoilers, but they've been marketing this movie with Red Hulk in it since its inception. It's no secret. They even have a popcorn bucket. I almost bought that. I'll just put it like this. If you're really excited to see Red Hulk hit live action up on the big screen, don't get too excited. And now this shirt will make sense, because at times, this doesn't feel like a Captain America movie. It feels like an epilogue movie to The Incredible Hulk that just so happens to have Captain America in it and not The Incredible Hulk. And also, real quick, there's an entire other villainous subplot going on throughout this film that feels like a Saturday morning cartoon, and I hated all of it. And there's way too much detail to dive into, but I'll save that for a spoiler video. Now let's talk about the visual style throughout this film and some of the visual effects. Throughout this film, a majority of the fight sequences are just very choppy and overly edited and almost panned in to the point where you couldn't even see when Sam Wilson threw his shield and it ricocheted off 7 things before it hit the bad guy in the face. I couldn't even tell where his shield was half the time. Now, here are my final flicking thoughts on Captain America: Brave New World. This just feels like a generic cliche comic book movie we've already seen multiple other times. It ultimately doesn't matter in the grand scheme of the MCU, and it's a movie that I don't feel like I'll remember in 2 weeks. I found it extremely anticlimactic, and the overall plot to the movie felt like it should have been an episode of Falcon and Winter Soldier on Disney+. So I'm going to give the new Captain America this right here. This is America's ass. And this movie is just sort of ass at times. And before I go, I'll keep it real with you. I don't want to see bad comic book movies. I want this genre to stay alive. I want to see awesome, epic comic book movies. I want to see action. I want to see mayhem. I want to see compelling characters. It's just unfortunate that the screenplay of this movie couldn't give us any of that. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. My name's John. This is the FlickPick channel. If you haven't subscribed already, do so, and I'll see you next time.
And America has a new weapon in the fight. His name, Captain America. Captain, go get them sauerkraut-eating bastards.